Welcome to our channel, Gray Matters. We are two neurodivergent ladies who fixate and need to share, and we've created this channel to do just that. Check out our podcast, Fixate Today, Gone Tomorrow, for some deeper dives. One of the abuses Mica alleged her husband perpetrated against her was the non-consensual release of a nude photograph of her on social media. The U.S. has begun recognizing internet-based sexual abuse as a criminal offense. What is internet-based sexual abuse, and what are the consequences for the victims? On April 8, 2024, Mica Miller's estranged husband, John Paul Miller, anonymously posted a nude photo of Mica on Facebook. He was the only intended audience for the picture of his wife. He removed the photo from his social media after about an hour, but the damage had been done.
Walk away.
I'll show you the pictures.
Do you want to go to jail?
They'll be on Facebook in a few hours.
Alrighty, you'll be in jail in a few hours. Walk away.
NewsNation obtaining this exclusive video of a heated argument.
According to Mica's 2023 divorce filing, this wasn't the first time that JP had shared a nude photo of her, accusing him of sending them to her friends at their church. Mica reached out to the police about this particular post, and they told her two things. First, they can't help her, because the image was posted anonymously, and they can't prove JP did it. And second, because the image had been strategically blurred, it didn't actually meet South Carolina's definition of nudity. JP emailed Mica apologizing for posting the image, along with other confessions. After her death, he claimed that he never posted the image, but sent the apology to convince her to start taking her medication. A few months earlier, in February 2024, Mica had called 911 regarding items that JP had taken control of during her involuntary hospitalization. She was worried about what JP would do with her phone and laptop that contained the nude images of her. She was worried about people staying at her and JP's home, and that they could also get a hold of these photos. She did not want these people that she didn't trust to have access to these images. According to a police report from that time, Mica was labeled as a 1096, meaning she was being considered mentally unwell. She never got her items returned. In an affidavit given to her attorney 9 days before her death, Mica detailed her abuse. She said, quote, "Since the day we became husband and wife, I have been abused in every way I can think of. Emotionally, sexually, spiritually, financially, and physically." Let's talk about what image-based sexual abuse is. According to endcyberabuse.org, internet-based sexual abuse is, quote, "the act of sharing images or videos of an individual that are sexually explicit without that person's consent." Multiple layers of consent are required when someone takes or is given a naked picture of another, both at the stage of taking the image as well as when the image is shared with a third party. Sometimes consent is missing when the image or video is taken and the victim is unaware or coerced into taking or sharing the image, or the image has been hacked or stolen. Often, internet-based sexual abuse occurs with the dissolution of a relationship. The threat of releasing an image or video is a form of control, and therefore abusive. The image or video can be used as a blackmail tool and is in the pattern of domestic abuse. It's the exertion of oppression or control when an abuser is being left. Generally, this is a crime perpetrated by men against women and is seen as gender-based abuse. Quote, "Perpetrators, usually men, are motivated by a desire to exert oppression or control over their victims, usually women. The release of these intimate images or videos leads to harassment by others, fear of physical attack, being ostracized from family, friends, cultural or religious communities, the loss of jobs, and much more. Photoshopped and AI images are also considered internet-based sexual abuse. It is so easy for outsiders to blame victims when intimate media is released, especially when the image or video was taken with consent. This becomes secondary victimization for the victim, who is likely already struggling with PTSD, depression, and anxiety from the loss of control and bodily autonomy. In a 2020 study from the National Library of Medicine, researchers looked at the sexual double standard of perception of women who are viewed in internet-based sexual assault. Researchers used the term cyber R-word in the study. They found, quote, that victims were perceived as more promiscuous and blameworthy when they were more naked, and by participants with more traditional gender roles. On May 23, 2024, former President Biden and former Vice President Harris enacted the Task Force to address online harassment and abuse. The executive order was partially a response to the rapidly increasing use of artificial intelligence in creating internet-based sexual abuse images. The order was also a call to technology companies, as well as regular people, to address the issue. The order said, quote, for survivors, this abuse can be devastating, upending their lives, disrupting their education and careers, and leading to depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, and an increased risk of suicide. This was built upon the Violence Against Women Act reauthorization in 2022, providing more resources and protections for victims. Let's briefly touch on why the phrase revenge P-word is a misnomer. I'm using the P-word because, although we're not monetized yet, I would rather us not get demonetized once we are. So it is the P-word that rhymes with corn. The word revenge suggests that the victim did something wrong to deserve this action to be taken in retaliation. The P-word is traditionally understood to be an act performed by actors who have consented to and are being paid for working. The term is victim-blaming language that takes the accountability off of the person who released the image or video without consent. With that in mind, let's talk about image-based sexual abuse and marital relationships. In the article, quote, What Mica Miller Teaches Us About Revenge, P-Word, and Abuse, author Sheila Ray Gregoire discusses the potential dangers of Christian women being used as sexual images for their husband. She defines internet-based sexual abuse as when, quote, a partner posts compromising photos or videos to get back at a woman who is attempting to separate or pull away. From the women she's worked with, most were coerced or talked into taking the photos by their husbands. The women felt pressure by not only their husbands, but by Christian advice. In their book, Married Sex, by Greg Thomas and Deborah Filetta, Thomas advised wives to take sexual photos for their husbands to satiate their higher sex drive, preventing them from turning to other women outside of their marriage, or the P-word. This is inherently coercive, putting the accountability of a man's wandering eye on his wife if she doesn't do everything in her power to keep him satisfied. Women agreed because, quote, there was no biblical reason to say no. This is women being coerced into an abusive dynamic on the basis of biblical marriage. However, men aren't fulfilling their part of the deal as biblical husbands. Over and over, women feel pressure by their husbands to take nude photos, and those photos are being used against the women as blackmail if the couple divorces.
And my Bible says that he took all the abuse you could think of for you so that you didn't have to live that life of slavery and bondage and pain.
The images are used in custody disputes, sent to employers, and are used as tools of alienation of the victim from friends, family, and their church community. It's a no-win situation for women like Mica. Her pastor husband likely coerced her into taking intimate photos and videos, and she acquiesced. Her role as an obedient wife was to serve her husband. But JP showed that he wasn't man enough to be a biblical husband and intentionally betrayed her with sharing these images without her consent.
So you don't have to stay in a abusive relationship, whether that's sexual, whether that's somebody forcing you to take illegal drugs, or alcohol abuse, or physical abuse, psychological abuse, making you...
Let's talk about the person who changed the way the world sees women and girls when they are coerced into baring themselves to a camera. Joe Francis. Joe was the creator of the series of DVDs in the early 2000s called Girls Gone Wild. Girls Gone Wild was, quote, pitched as a chance to see the good girl next door go bad. The premise was that Joe and his crew went to popular vacation destinations for college-age women and would encourage them to flash a video camera. Almost each and every time, the young woman was intoxicated, making consent not attainable. Joe and his employees allegedly used coercive tactics to convince women to remove their clothing for the camera. Camera operators were trained not to take no for an answer.
The whole fantasy was that it was real. The girl you've had a crush on comes up to you and says,
it was so shocking.
Hey, I'm over here.
It blew my mind what Joe Francis was able to convince these young girls to do.
If I took no for an answer, I wouldn't be where I was.
Joe Francis.
Quickly, Girls Gone Wild went from women flashing at the camera to much more. The people purchasing the DVDs felt like they weren't watching the P word because these were just regular girls, drunk and uninhibited. It made men feel like the fantasy of a regular guy attaining the P star because these girls were all American Girls Next Door was attainable. For an idea about who Joe Francis is, he was quoted saying things like, quote, "You can't R-word your spouse." I think to this day, Joe believes that consent can be given when under the influence, so he's done nothing wrong. The girls, yes, underage girls were exploited in Girls Gone Wild, and women who were featured have not been able to escape the impact of appearing on one of these DVDs. People still DM them, ask for pictures and autographs, and ask to see if they've made more adult content. In the docuseries Girls Gone Wild, The Untold Story, victims describe being worn down by Joe and his team and being afraid to say no, or saying no and having that no be ignored. Attempts at holding Joe accountable have been happening for years, including a group of women suing him for not being compensated and not being prepared for what would be actually happening. Girls Gone Wild unleashed a pervasive view that anyone who would participate in taking a sexual image or video deserved the consequences that followed, and that the men who were coercing these women and girls were not the guilty ones. Gone are the days of exploiting girls on DVD. Now we have the internet. In late 2010, self-proclaimed, quote, professional life ruiner Hunter Moore started a website called isanyoneup.com. Users could post photos without the consent of the people in them, often with personal information attached. Users were mostly men who were posting pictures of women by whom they were rejected or had ended a relationship with. Despite saying otherwise, Moore refused to take down photos when a request was made. Moore also paid hackers to break into email accounts and steal images. An FBI investigation began in 2012, leading to the site being shut down after running for 16 months in April 2012. The URL was sold to the anti-bullying group Bullyville. Moore ended up being sued by James McGibney, the founder of this group. James won $350,000 in a defamation suit. Moore had publicly called James a pedophile and had threatened to R-word his wife. In February 2015, Moore pleaded guilty to felony charges of identity theft and aiding and abetting in unauthorized access of a computer. In November 2015, he was sentenced to 2 years and 6 months, a fine of $2,000, and to pay a whopping $145.70 in restitution. In the early to mid-2000s, we saw an onslaught of celebrity sex tapes being leaked online. A celebrity sex tape is generally an amateur video recording involving one or more famous people that was either intentionally or unintentionally released publicly. In the early days of these leaks, we saw content that involved such celebrities as Pamela Anderson, Kim Kardashian, Paris Hilton, and even Hulk Hogan. Most of these famous people have figured out how to spin these videos into helping their careers, but most would say the release of the content was traumatizing, regardless of how they were able to use it to their advantage, and I say more power to them. In 2014, nearly 500 photos of celebrities, mostly women, were leaked from iCloud and posted on 4chan. With social media, the images quickly spread across the internet. In addition to the private photos that were hacked, the hackers were able to access and share calendars, text, phone logs, and more from iPhones of the celebrities. The hackers found a security issue that allowed a user unlimited attempts at guessing a password, which was linked to an exploit in the Find My iPhone service. Confirmed victims were Jennifer Lawrence, who called the leak a sex crime and a sexual violation, Kate Upton, Mary Elizabeth Winstead, Kaylee Cuoco, and Kirsten Dunst. Celebrities who were rumored to be involved in the leak but denied the authenticity of the images were Ariana Grande, Yvonne Strahovski, Nick Hogan, and Victoria Justice. 2 confirmed victims who ended up being underage at the time of the leak were Liz Lee and Michaela Maroney. Many celebrities who weren't in the leak encouraged people not to view the images, as the act of viewing the images without consent of the person in the images is a violation to the victim. Ultimately, 6 men were charged and convicted in the leak. In 2023, British reality TV star Georgia Harrison spoke out about the struggle she had in pursuing legal consequences against her ex-boyfriend, Stephen Bear, after he shared a private sex video without her consent. Bear was jailed for 21 months and placed on the sex offender registry, and Georgia was granted a 5-year restraining order from him. When a former intimate partner breaks such a sacred trust, it leads to the inability to trust anyone again. Georgia spoke about the confusion of being in love in one moment and then having your former partner sell your most intimate moments on the internet the next. The denial of bodily autonomy due to the nature of the crime meant navigating grief, depression, and anxiety just incredibly challenging for Georgia. She spoke out to encourage lawmakers to make prosecuting abusers who release image-based sexual abuse material easier. In 2008, ESPN and Fox Sports correspondent Erin Andrews suffered through the release of a non-consensual video of her nude in a hotel room. To this day, Erin is known as one of the most influential women in the male-dominated sports profession, and the release of this video caused huge issues in her career. Michael David Barrett filmed Erin through a peephole in her Nashville Marriott hotel room. In July 2009, the video went viral. In October 2009, he was arrested and pleaded guilty on December 15th. At the time of Barrett's arrest, a second nude video of Erin was discovered on his computer, taken at a Milwaukee Radisson. This video was never released. Barrett was sentenced to 2.5 years in prison, 3 years probation, $5,000 in fines, and $7,366 in restitution. He was released July 3, 2012. Erin ended up suing Barrett, Marriott International, West End Hotel Partners, Windsor Capital Group, and Radisson Hotels for invasion of privacy and negligence. In the Marriott lawsuit, Erin alleged that hotel employees told Barrett when she was staying at the hotel and gave him the room next to hers. She sought $75 million in damages. The jury ultimately awarded her $55 million in damages, declaring Barrett to be 51% responsible and the hotel to be 49% responsible. During the trial, Erin testified that ESPN would not allow her to return to her broadcasting position unless she spoke publicly about the incident because of the rumors that it was a publicity stunt. Erin felt pressured into doing this for the sake of her career. It was yet another instance of the victim being shamed by the choices of a perpetrator. Thankfully, it appears things may be changing to make perpetrators of image-based sexual abuse to be held more accountable. In April 2024, 2 women in New York State were awarded $3.5 million in the first 2 cases to be tried under New York State's revenge P-word law. In August 2023, a woman in Texas was awarded $1.2 billion after her ex-boyfriend shared, quote, visually intimate material of her online and in emails to her loved ones and colleagues after they broke up. The man, Marcus Jamal Jackson, posted the images on social media, quote, on an impersonation page of a P-word website, and publicly available in a Dropbox folder. The woman's lawyer alleges that Jackson told his ex that she would, quote, spend the rest of your life trying and failing to wipe yourself off the internet. Everyone you ever met will hear the story and go looking. Happy hunting. The victim began a relationship with Jackson in 2016. The pair had a, quote, long and drawn-out breakup, and their relationship officially ended in October 2021. Jackson became, quote, delusional and paranoid that the woman had started a new relationship and began releasing the intimate images after the victim had requested that he destroy the images with the ending of the relationship. The victim had consensually shared some of the images with Jackson, but he also took many without her knowledge, as well as recording them during intimate moments. He hacked the woman's work Zoom account, told a loan officer that she had submitted a fraudulent application, stole money from her bank account, harassed her via fake phone numbers, and hacked into her mother's home security system to spy on her. After the trial, the jury voted unanimously, after 30 minutes of deliberation, to award the woman $1 billion in punitive damages and $200 million in actual damages. The damages, according to court documents, are the, quote, mental anguish she has suffered in the past and will suffer in the future. Despite the victim and her attorney knowing Jackson doesn't have any assets, they asserted that the case wasn't about the money, but about deterrence. The judge, however, ruled that the judgment can remain attached to Jackson's future assets. This will hang over his head for the rest of his life. JP's threats to humiliate Mica must have been constantly hanging over her head. She was trying to start her life over on her own terms, and the man who had been abusing her for years was holding on to this final indignity as a means of controlling Mica. The weight of that must have been exhausting. And we know that when JP feels a loss of control, he acts out. Surely more content that he coerced Mica into making would have been released if Mica had lived and escaped.
So, encouragement in all this is, you are the bride of Christ first, before anybody else's. And he's got you. And he sees you. And he loves you.
Thank you for listening. Please comment, like, and subscribe. You can also check out our podcast, Fixate Today, Gone Tomorrow, for more content. Have anything you'd like us to fixate on? Reach out and let us know. Thanks for joining us. Disclaimer: we are not investigators, journalists, detectives, law enforcement, or historians. We are two neurodivergent ladies who just hyperfixate. Please do not take our opinions and ideas as statements of fact. All allegations are just that. We are not accusing anyone of anything, simply offering our interpretation of what we've researched.